Tell me your daily habits and I'll tell you your financial future. Sadly, many people who want financial success never achieve it despite working hard. Why? Because unknowingly they hinder their own financial development with their daily actions. Often, this is because they spend time on activities that generate few benefits or even losses, ignoring economic laws that explain their financial failure. If you want to know what's stopping your finances from succeeding, this video is for you, because today we'll see how the law of diminishing returns is affecting your finances. Are you ready? Let's begin. What is the law of diminishing returns? The law of diminishing returns is an economic concept popularized by renowned economist David Ricardo, which demonstrates the decrease in efficiency of a product or service when adding more productive factors in the creation of a good or service. Simply put, this means that each time you add more of a resource, the increase in results is smaller and smaller and may even decrease, affecting the final results. For example, in a factory, there is only one employee who produces 10 units of a product daily, but the business owner, seeing that he is making good profits, decides to hire another employee to double production and increase his profits. However, with 2 workers, daily production is only 19 units, not the expected 20. Even so, he decides to hire a 3rd employee, but now the 3 employees produce only 24 units per day. On average, each worker produces only 8 units per day, whereas before a single worker produced 10 units. That is, by increasing the number of workers, total production increases. However, individual productivity decreases. And if you continue to hire more workers, it may happen that instead of benefiting, it harms production and affects profits, or even generates losses. Why is this happening? For several reasons, actually. It could be that by having more workers, distractions, socializing between them, or lack of available tools and machines increase, causing delays. Keep this in mind to identify in your own finances that obtaining an additional benefit may not be financially and economically justifiable in relation to the result you will obtain. Therefore, you must recognize the right balance between the efficient use of a resource and the benefit you get from it, avoiding the inefficiencies caused by this economic law. It is very common for poor people, when they don't have money, to decide to work even more hours. But this doesn't necessarily generate greater benefits or get them out of poverty, especially if they dedicate themselves to inefficient activities, and that, instead of developing economically, end up more sunk in poverty. Now, let's see how this happens in many aspects of our financial life without us realizing it. Unnecessary expenses. We'll always recommend budgeting and controlling expenses to have healthy finances, but it is also recommended to have an amount set aside to spend on things you like. Not being so restrictive on your budget will make organizing your finances more enjoyable and allow you to continue enjoying your money and your effort. Spending on things you want, but that are not financially advisable, can help motivate you to continue improving your financial situation. Rest time. This refers to the complete opposite of the previous point, as just like we have responsibilities such as work or business, we should also seek rest from these activities, have moments of disconnection from routine, and spend more time with family and friends. However, instead of gaining these benefits, rest can have the opposite effect. By overindulging in leisure hours or spending time with people who do not add value, you may start to hinder your personal and financial development. Rest to recharge your energy and recover productivity levels is crucial, but failing to find an appropriate time for this without affecting the time you need to dedicate to activities that generate your income and ensure your financial well-being can have a negative impact. Spending more hours on rest than necessary can harm your goal of generating more income or improving your finances, especially if these leisure moments lead to additional expenses. Investment diversification. On many occasions, you've likely heard about the importance of diversifying your investments to reduce risks with your money, and this is a valid recommendation. However, applying the law of diminishing returns, to what extent is it beneficial to diversify your money? While it seems there's nothing wrong with diversification, there is an opportunity cost in optimizing your money's returns. Diversification reduces the risk of losing your money, but according to basic finance theory, lower risk results in lower returns. Your money will be safer from any loss, but you will sacrifice the returns you might achieve and its potential for growth. Diversifying offers more long-term security, perhaps for your retirement, especially if you currently don't have significant capital to invest. On the other hand, if you have little capital, your only option is to invest in activities and alternatives that provide greater benefits, which may require taking more risks rather than being conservative. You need to find a balance between your risk level and the returns you expect before deciding if diversification is useful for you. I invite you to subscribe for more content. Now let's talk about savings. With savings, similar to initial diversification, you save and gain benefits from it as it provides security and stability, giving you a financial buffer for any unforeseen events. However, for someone who wants to build wealth, it may be sufficient to save for an emergency fund, and the rest should be invested. The more you save, the more peace of mind you will have in your financial life, but the benefits you gain each time you save more money diminish, potentially even leading to a loss of money due to opportunity cost, as the money would be generating little return and could be better utilized in investments. Savings are, of course, very important, but remember that for money to generate more money, it must be in rotation and movement. People who built their fortunes did not just save, but primarily invested. According to the law of diminishing returns, there will come a time when, for every dollar you save, instead of benefits, you will be affecting your future financial growth. Debt and credit. In previous videos, we mentioned the importance of debt in building wealth and how it is one of the most used tools by millionaires to make their investments. It allows them to leverage to gain higher returns. Working with debt or credit is literally making money with other people's money, giving you the possibility to make larger investments. However, caution is needed as the law of diminishing returns may come into play. As you increase your debt to achieve higher returns on your investments, these returns will increase, but to a lesser extent, and eventually your debt will raise your credit risk, also increasing interest rates and affecting your gains. This is one of the biggest issues in finance, knowing the optimal level of debt to incur in any investment without the benefits being significantly affected by the financial cost. Remember, the higher the debt, the greater the returns, but it also increases the risk, impacting your gains due to the high financial cost. Planning and organization. In everything you do, whether it's starting a business, aiming to achieve a goal, or making an investment, you should always plan before taking action and organize your finances and how to manage them to help achieve these objectives. This prevents or minimizes the risks of encountering situations that could jeopardize your financial health. Some people suffer from analysis paralysis, where the planning that initially helped improve their finances becomes a negative factor because they focus more on planning than on executing their ideas, delaying decisions that should be made to improve their financial situation. Planning is an excellent tool for setting financial goals, but if overdone or overly complicated, the law of diminishing returns will come into play and you'll lose all the benefits gained. Therefore, don't wait to have a perfect plan to start, as no one can have an infallible plan. It would be like predicting the future, which is impossible. Financial education. Although it's true that financial education is one of the best tools to improve your finances, many people who have built their fortunes didn't necessarily have formal education in a school or university, but learned through practice, such as starting a business. For this, they had to learn to analyze financial statements, assess business profitability, prepare budgets and cash flows. In other words, they learned through experience. On the other hand, some people never start investing or a business because they don't feel prepared. However, according to the law of diminishing returns, much of the financial knowledge will be acquired through books, videos, blogs, courses. But there will come a time when the knowledge gained won't justify the time invested, as most will be learned through practice. You don't need to be a finance expert to start in this fascinating world. As a recommendation, dedicate 10% of your time to learning theory, 20% to talking to others, and 70% to learning by doing or putting into practice. Therefore, don't delay starting, because no one started a business or investment being an expert, but rather improved gradually. So, put all your knowledge into action immediately. Income diversification. This recommendation is very common in personal finance. Apparently, there's no problem with this. However, when people have a good source of income, they start to diversify into new investments to get better returns on their money. To what extent is it wise to take your money earned from your effort, whether from a job or a source of income like a business, and invest it in another activity you barely know just to diversify? Wouldn't it be more profitable to reinvest that money in your current activity, where you're already getting benefits, because it's the activity you know best and could leverage more? Reinvesting profits is one of the best ways to grow your capital, as the power of compounding and interest will have a greater impact. If you diversify income, you'll have multiple sources of income. But since time is limited, it will be impossible to devote yourself to all of them without affecting the time you previously dedicated to your main source of income, impacting it and reducing future returns. If you have limited capital, focusing on maximizing a single investment is more advisable than diversifying, as otherwise you might lose what you've already gained in seeking something you don't yet have. Risk management. It's no secret that if you want greater financial benefits, you'll need to take on greater risks. However, to minimize losses, you need to educate yourself about the investment you plan to make. But how much risk is advisable? Although this depends on each person's particular situation and risk profile, it's not the same for someone with $1,000 as for someone with millions. As you increase the capital to invest, you should adjust the level of risk you take, as the amount of money you could lose will also increase. That's why most wealthy people invest more conservatively, diversifying or in safer investments, such as real estate or fixed income securities, which, although they have low returns, allow them to avoid risking the money already earned. However, a person with little capital can afford to take more risks, as they have much to gain and little to lose. Therefore, find a balance between return and risk. It's not always advisable to risk your money for greater gains, as the priority is to protect it. The law of diminishing returns is a tool that can help you find the balance between gaining benefits and minimizing negative effects on your finances when using your money. Often, people overextend themselves with debt, planning, unproductive times, and without realizing, affect their ability to generate wealth, condemning themselves to financial poverty. I hope you identify these aspects of your finances that may be harming your financial well-being and correct them immediately to achieve better financial results in your life. Share your thoughts on the topic, and I also recommend some videos. Thank you for your time, and see you next time.